So I took some tears off my eyes and I put it on his forehead.
Listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard.
It's a logical fallacy, and I know that, but, as always, and maybe the rest of the panel can tell you, I play a bit of the devil's advocate because I am the lone black Republican up here.
He just made a fool out of himself. I mean, you can look at Dennis Rodman and think he's making a fool out of himself.
You know Barack Obama, what he was like, anti-war, government...
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I got to jump into a rally to save a hospital here in Brooklyn in just a minute.
I stopped working on my dissertation the second my grandmother died.
I am a blazing liberal who can have a Republican-leaning ideology to give me enough beers.
No, I got to get you that Illuminati thesaurus. Once you get that, you're going to be able to speak in the same language I can speak.
Now, a white person with a criminal record is more likely to get a job than a black person without one.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yup!
The point of financial stability and economic justice is that you're free from confines of society and you have more freedom and to make your own choices.
Just in general, people who have money tend to have more access to resources to be able to use in their defense versus people that don't have money. So you see a lot of, lower, and that's really a class issue, and race does come into play.
This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, The Voice.
You're right. Corporations are people, don't you know?
Right.
Wait, corporations are people, sir. How could you say that? Just 1 second, actually, because I know Jack has a question. But corporations are humans. I dated Target for 3 months.
I bet you did. But I did want to just let everyone know, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with John Lewis of Marriage Equality USA. He is an attorney as well as the legal, in fact, he works in the legal and the policy side, as well as being a board member at Marriage Equality USA. And I think Jackie wanted to chime in.
Yeah, so, I mean, despite these huge efforts to kind of keep us held back, I know a lot of people say that overall, as a country, America has really progressed as far as LGBT rights in the past decade. And we're moving even more so towards a more progressive future, a lot of people are saying. So do you think that bills like this that we've been seeing come across, different state legislatures are really just like a desperate last attempt to hold on to this conservative lifestyle? But, do you think conservatives are aware that they're losing this battle? And that in the next, they are though. Think about it. In the next few decades, more young people than ever know that, are coming out, know that they have friends that are gay, are way more tolerant, towards people who are gay, and we're seeing, in some of these states. It's easy for us to say as progressive New Yorkers, but in a lot of other states where it used to be illegal to take part, gay activities, quote unquote, it's no longer so. So a lot of people are saying, like, overall, we are moving towards a more progressive future. So do you think that bills like this, and attempts like this, are just these last efforts for conservatives to really hold on to what, to their agenda?
Yeah, I think you really nailed it there, and that's what I was trying to articulate. Back in 2004, just using the marriage equality issue as an example, back in 2004, their main argument was marriage is between a man and a woman. That's just the way it is. And then over about 4 years, that argument started to lose its resonance because of many of the factors you said. And then actually out here in California, the Prop 8 campaign, the campaign consultant for the right wing said, if we run that argument, we are going to lose this election and lose it bad. We've got to say that lesbian and gay people are somehow drawing that old stereotype, somehow dangerous to children. And so they came up with a strategy. And then that ran out of gas. And now they're going with this idea, well, if you allow all of this, now you're trampling on on our religious freedom. It's trying to make them the victims. We need Congress to act, or we need our state legislature to act.
Definitely. We do need to act. We agree with you on that point, John, of course.
So we do have to go on a quick break, John. When we come back, I want to talk about your involvement in Prop 8. You are a bit of a celebrity. So, and you are one, as I would call, the cool kids at the table. So we're going to go on. That's right. Yeah. We're selfie bros now. I want you to know that. So we'll be right back, guys, after this quick break. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM, WHCR, the voice of Harlem.
Thank you.
What's his name again?
John. That's the right name.
Yeah, right.
What is it, Justin Bieber? How do we go? All-star song. It's Afrojack.
you know how Selena always bashes me, right? Then she told me to play the same song she bashed.
Yeah.
You do
the song I played last week for you.
I don't remember. I wasn't here last week.
Selena, you told me to play this song. You said play more house music.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yes, we. Although I would have told you, I knew you wanted to play house music. I would have given you something to play.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for playing.
The promos suck. Don't record that.
Oh well, we have to play video
Hi.
You play the same ones each
Because they're the
week.
only ones that don't sound like total shit.
No, I engineered that one time. I found like 2 other ones that were really good. I
Which
really
ones?
did.
Tell me.
One was I think Alzheimer's, and one was about children.
That's a yes. That's a
From 8 p.m. until the stroke of midnight.
Well, play the
So you are hearing
That's
some
what I
of
meant to say.
the
I'm sorry, when I say
best
promos, I
R&B
just mean
love songs of
commercials.
today and yesteryear.
bad.
That's right. We take you from 1948 and bring you all the way up to the present, baby.
I love
Been
these
serving you
promos
your
so much.
love for over 22 long years. So hey, mark your calendar. This Friday at 8, you and I have a date. I'll see you there.
I wish my voice sounded like
Hey, radio people, this is Let Your Voice Be Heard, and this is me trying to talk like that guy in the promo. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, and if you're tuning in for the first time today, we are talking about the psychotic anti-LGBT laws in Arizona and possibly being pushed in other states, and to help us with that conversation is the mighty John Lewis, who is also known as my selfie bro. We took a selfie together. Me from New York, him from San Francisco.
Right.
And before we went on break, he mentioned Proposition 8, which I want to let you guys know who are listening that John and his husband were actually one of the plaintiffs in Proposition 8. So, John, if you don't mind, just let the listeners know a little bit about that.
Once you put his mic on.
His mic was actually on, Selena. It was the volume was down. Go ahead, John.
Sorry.
In 2004, San Francisco, quite famously, in February 12, 2004, they just kicked the door open for all loving, committed couples to come into City Hall and get married. And Stuart and I, actually, it's a testament to showing up for the rally.
I said I needed to speak before we went. You said we're going to break. And then you asked him another question.
Oh, sorry about that.
Freedom to marry.
This is not important.
We were there because we showed up.
All right.
And
So
we
what's
were
your
one of the
question?
first 10 couples to get married out of over 4,000 that got married. And then we had it taken away from us.
Well, we have a comment from
because
Politically
the court
Preposterous
said
first.
San Francisco can't
From a
do
fan that
without going
wants
to court first. So we
so that's what
said,
they're going to say?
sure.
And then also I have a
We'll
second
go to
question
court.
for him.
And
Say
we
the question,
and other
give a
couples,
comment,
the
then I'm
city
going
of
to ask a
San
question.
Francisco,
We'll
we
come
sued
back
the
to
state of
it.
California
Yeah,
for
so
the
say the
freedom to
question,
marry.
get a
And in
comment,
2008,
Selena's question,
we won.
then I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit, and we'll come back to you, okay?
Well, before you shift,
Before we
what are you
shift
shifting it to? Because the thing is, I want to bring up the right-wing argument and see what his response is.
I want to talk about the money, where the money's coming from.
See, don't. So let me ask my question first.
And all of our parents now are 90 years
But he
old.
already
But
said
they came out for the wedding. It was
But
tremendous.
don't shift it yet. Then let me ask my question.
Prop 8
Get a
took
comment
away
first.
that freedom to marry
Then
from
Selena, then your
Californians,
question.
and that really a horrible political campaign. And so
That's
we
right.
have continued to fight for the freedom to marry for all and for full recognition and respect for LGBT people across our country.
Thank you for that. And now, before we go any further, I know we have a comment from one of our favorite fan pages, Politically Preposterous.
Yeah, we're getting some good comments now, but somebody, one of our fans, Ms. Burton, says that she'd like us to expound on the fact that the law being vetoed is a good thing, but it really changes nothing for LGBT people in Arizona, where there are no legal protections. She says that she hears that a staggering statistic, which is that 75% of Americans don't know that in many states it's still legal to be fired or denied housing and other things for being gay. And then she goes on to ask, how can it be that people don't know this? And then another commenter writes back saying, I'm among that 75% that don't know it, and my guess is because it's absurd. Discrimination is discrimination, and my understanding was that it was all illegal. So
Wow.
Start talking about the silver lining to bills like this being brought up, because fair-minded Americans don't realize that, exactly as you said, there is no federal law that protects LGBT people against discrimination in the workplace or in public accommodations like hotels and restaurants. So ironically, this law is raising this issue, and when we take it and run with it, like with shows like you're doing, then we're raising that consciousness so people understand, and then they can call and rally and organize and get on social media and say, this is wrong, we have to change it.
Right. Yeah. Guys, if you want to call and if you have a question for John Lewis or one of us up here on the panel, the number is 212-650-6903. You can also tweet us at BeHeard_radio. And I did want to sort of spotlight or talk about the people who may not necessarily feel connected to the movement or the discrimination that's going on in states like Arizona, South Dakota, etc. And I just wanted to say, like, from that perspective, because I had a chance to actually speak to some people, and they were like, they don't necessarily participate in LGBT marches or rallies, but they do look at it from like, okay, if you can make a law that would discriminate against this group of people, then what's to stop us from totally reverting back to the Jim Crow South or the Jim Crow era in which people weren't allowed to get married to someone of the opposite race. And voting rights were already being slashed. So I did just want to kind of mention that. I feel like it's interconnected with everyone's lives, especially if you're a minority of any type or sort, whether you're Hispanic, you're Black, you're an immigrant, whatever it may be. I think that this speaks to the larger issue here, which is that, discrimination, especially when it's coming from a legal perspective or it's being put into place by legislators, it's something that's extremely problematic, and we all need to make sure that we mobilize to fight against it, because we're next. Regardless of where you stand on anything, I feel like we're next. So I wanted to just definitely mention that.
Plenty of times. We all know what happens towards the end.
Right.
It's what you were saying earlier. Back in 1967, the Supreme Court finally said, you can't, a state cannot have a law that prohibits a couple of different races from getting married. And in that lawsuit, the judge at the lower court, he actually said, this is what he actually said in his reasoning, that the Lord God Almighty has put people of different races on different continents so that they will not mix. And that's the natural order of things. So these laws about letting people have the freedom to marry regardless of their race, those are fine because that's what the religious purpose was. So if we start saying that who knows what someone's religious idea is? When we start saying that, the laws that protect
who said this to
you? Who said what I said?
No, who said that to you?
I heard it.
I'm saying risk because somebody can say, hey, that's my religion. I don't want to serve those people, and just like another person says, I don't want to serve those people because those are LGBT people, or it goes on and on. So we are all of this. You have nailed it. That's exactly true.
So I'm going to preface this. I personally disagree with what this person had said to me, or at least the point that they were trying to make. But I think that it's an interesting point, and I'm curious to get your opinion on it. So somebody had said to me, who I was talking to and having this debate with, they said, well, the baker at issue in this case, that precipitated the push for this law, was a guy who was come to by, I think it was a lesbian couple, had asked them to make a wedding cake. And he felt that he didn't want to make a wedding cake for their wedding because he didn't want to be involved in their same-sex marriage because it went against his religion. And so this person made the argument that the guy, the baker, essentially didn't tell them he would never bake them cakes at all or ever because they were gay. That, if they wanted a birthday cake, if they wanted, an anniversary cake for their parents, or, a first birthday cake for a friend's kid, or any other type of pastry, or that he would gladly do it. But that his objection was specifically about not making the wedding cake because he didn't want to be involved in the same-sex marriage.
Because he was raised by wolves.
And so they make the argument that liberals, that we're going, that we're blowing this out of proportion and we're calling it anti-gay discrimination, when in reality, at least in this specific case, his act was just, I don't want to make this wedding cake because that goes against my religious beliefs, not I don't want to make you a cake because you're gay. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you respond to that?
I think the first thing is it really comes down to marriage, and I think that's why this has resonated so across the nation. The Freedom to Marry movement it's about, really in a sense the most intimate part of our lives. It's about our bonding with another human being and connecting and loving them and having this, we hope, most wonderful, affectionate, spiritual, emotional, bonding connection. And to have businesses that operate in the public and try to make money off the public, to have them say that aspect of you, say, oh, I'm not homophobic, but that aspect of your life, your instinct and your nature to love and bond with another human being, that is against my religion. That I will not serve you in that sense. You don't count. It is such, it cuts to our dignity as human beings. And just the same way as if he said, I would give you a birthday cake, but, because you are, Chinese and your husband is white, that just goes against my religion because God said, you're on different continents, and it just cuts so much to the core of who we are, that it's very important to protect that dignity of each of us, because it's about so much more than just the...
Right.
John, the Bible says a lot of stuff. I think there's a part in there where you can lose your testicles as a man if you do something bad. I'm not joking. Jackie?
Well, that's my lead-in. Great. No, I mean, I think, people are very afraid that they're going to lose their religious expression, right? And I personally think that you sort of have to, if you're religious, you sort of have to exist in two worlds, right? There's this religious world that you can exist in and your civic world. I know, and my parents are going to crack up because I know they're listening, and they're going to laugh at this, but they sent me to Hebrew school, right? I went to regular school during the day, and I went to Hebrew school, where I learned two different, not different sets of rules, but, they were not the same things I was learning in Hebrew school that I was learning in academic school. And I was given the opportunity to, be religious if I chose to be, but also, I was learning things like evolution in my public school and things like that, which is very controversial to some. So, I think that ultimately people need to keep their sort of civic life and their religious life, as separate as possible, and you have to interact with other people and give them rights. What do you think the answer is, though? Because people are really afraid that they're going to lose that part of themselves, and that's why I think they're holding on so desperately to bills like these. Like, what do you think is the proper solution for people that are really religious and really worried that
us as people, I think communication is the key. And I'll give you the example. I was on a 5-hour plane ride from Chicago to San Francisco last night. And I just struck up a conversation about
I was just
chatting
really
with the
quickly.
person next to me, and I just, in the most casual, ordinary way, talked about my husband. My husband's going to meet me at the airport, and we just started talking about my life. And then she, as it was, she sort of started to share about her life, and she had a gay brother. And then she went on to talk about how actually she was a born-again Christian.
Right.
And she started talking about her faith a little bit, and then, the thing you can do on an airplane flight, because you probably are never going to see the person again, we just took it to a really deep level, and I talked about how it felt, about some of her religious beliefs, and she talked about where she was coming from, and we talked for 5 hours the entire time, and we hugged on the loading bridge as we left, and it was real connection.
Wow.
That's
that
amazing.
Is so beautiful, John. And I just wanted to add on really, really quickly as a religious person, I mean, and as a Christian, the biggest message in the Bible is love and tolerance. Like, I just don't see how Christians can condone this type of discrimination in any way whatsoever. I think that it actually is hypocritical to a lot of the principles in the Bible and what Christians proclaim to be. So, and I thank you for sharing that story. I think that the more we talk about it and express different points, then the more we can all grow to learn to love and accept one another.
Thank you for that 10-second comment, Selena. Thank you so much for that, John. So we had to wrap this up, but please, can you give us at least one tangible thing that we can do to help to fight and to make sure that legislation like this does not make it through anywhere else?
I have it at my fingertips, but as you said, there are many states that are considering these bills. I know Missouri, my home state, is one of them, and there are a whole bunch of them. And this is what we can do: we can find out which those states are, Missouri, Kansas, all those states, and we can say, who do we know?
I know, but I want to give the list for people.
Who are our friends and our family that live in those states?
Maybe we should.
And to educate them and tell them to call their legislator.
So I'm saying, I already have it up.
I have it too, but it's
do not
not
pass this bill.
Thank you.
And we can get on Facebook and all the social media, and we can keep spreading the word that, oh my goodness, this Arizona bill has taught me that LGBT people and ultimately all of us are at risk to being served in our businesses and our public lives. And we have to enact those protections and just spread the word, make it go viral, and we're going to change them.
Thank you so much for that, John. And John, thank you very much for being on the show with us today. I think I can say for everyone, we all enjoyed this conversation. We got a lot out of it. We got to close this out, but once again, thank you for everything, and hope to have you again. So guys, before I go, I want to close it out with this, and I want to give props to Solis for giving me this list as well. It's very simple. I'm not here to advocate for people who feel like dealing with LGBT people is hurting their religion or prosecuting them. You people, I don't care about you. You're stupid. And I'm sure you guys don't agree with me.
Who cares? Because we don't care.
Yeah, I think those people are stupid and they're small-minded, and you pretty much just pervert the Bible, and you create people like me who don't believe in religion, organized religion. For those of you who want to help to spread equality for all people, here are the states who are trying to push similar legislation: Hawaii, Idaho, Kansas, Maine, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Ohio, Oregon, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah. If you don't live in those states, you may know someone who lives in those states, or you may know a candidate who's running on a party who supports LGBT rights, because the primaries are coming up, and all of these states have at least one person running for office, either for re-election or for an empty seat, which means you can have a say in getting in someone who will fight for the rights of all people. Jackie, real quick?
Yeah, I think we should put that list on the site so that people can check it out later and make those calls. But the best thing you can do is reach out to these people, get them to vote, get them to call their legislators, and let them know. I mean, we saw in this bill a lot of the legislators that voted for it heard from their constituents after and regretted the decision. So if they had heard before, I mean, now it's vetoed, so that's a good thing. But they need to be hearing from you. If you live in one of these states, or you have family or friends that live in one of these states, you need to reach out to them. It's our civic duty to make sure that bills like these don't pass in their states.
Also...
Guys, it's still in my closing statements.
No, but I was just saying, also, well, you seem to be getting a closing from everybody, but no, but you have to also remember that right now the way this law was written so broadly that it could have applied to people, not just LGBT people. It could have allowed a business to discriminate against you based on their religion for some other reason. So it's not, LGBT people really is the focus, but you have to remember that at any given time, if bills like this pass that are written this broadly, you could walk in and want a cake from somebody or whatever other service you want to buy, and they can turn around and say, oh no, well, for some reason I don't like you because my religion says I shouldn't have to, and this law will protect them in that regard. So it's broader than, it's about LGBT people, but it's broader than that. So people should really think about that when they think about these laws.
Stop letting stupid people write laws. That's the first thing we need to do. Guys, we gotta go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the news roundup, your favorite news stories throughout the week, things that made you curse, cry, flip the table, or just tune into the show today. We'll be right back.
Stanley, so you didn't do a closing remark?
No.
Because it was done already.
We're over. I was doing it, then Jackie has something to say.
I'm so
I thought it was
sorry.
going to be quick.
I feel so bad.
It's okay. I'm going to with you guys. Hey, especially for you political junkies who always want to talk about politics, you go to Vocalize, you will have fun. I signed up myself now, I'll read an article, and the responses are longer than the articles.
Right.
It's really...
No, they really are.
It's
Really
hardcore.
it really is.
We have that a lot on my page, but it's just sometimes people go off topic.
Right.
And that can be really, you can't stop that when you're having a debate in studio, or you and I are having a conversation. I can say, hey, Selena, you made a point, but that's not really what we're discussing. And then you'll be like, oh, okay. That's like sort of the problem with online. Is it has people have too, it's too easy for people to deviate and change the conversation to what they want it to be.
Exactly. I think that's always a problem, and I need to shout out our other.
Oh, I was gonna say changing the conversation. I want to talk about I Am Culture.
Right. I Am Culture. Also another partner that we have here, and we have O'Neill, CEO, co-founder of I Am Culture. I hope I got the title right.
Put the camera towards you right now. Do it.
Yeah.
And wait,
don't do that. That's not gonna come out
Where
right.
is my I Am Culture hat? My head has been cold all winter until my friend Katrina gave me her live hat, which I love. Where's my I Am Culture hat, my I Am Culture hoodie, and my I Am Culture...
You just want to milk them for all their products. Selena, those cost money.
What you're doing is making him think he should charge me, and what you should be doing is telling him to give me free stuff. All right?
Well, I'll tell you where it is.
He's telling me where it is.
Where is it? Where is it? ShopIamCulture.com?
ShopIamCulture.com.
ShopIamCulture.com,
Right, and you can get really cool, nifty gear that looks really nice.
I'm going to start a change.org petition to have Jackie deported back to, Whitestone, and also to get free I Am Culture stuff.
Did you just pick Whitestone because it had white in it?
No, I used to live in Whitestone. And we do not talk about those days.
Last but not least, also want to give a shout out to the New York Urban League Young Professionals who gave a great seminar yesterday.
Yeah, your
closing
pictures are amazing.
speaker. Yeah, we had a closer. The closing speaker was Reverend Al Sharpton. A number of former Let Your Voice Be Heard guests were actually featured there. And and shout out to Jamar T. Ward, the New York Urban League Young Professional President, who is also a former Dreamer and Doer. And speaking of Dreamer and Doer, later on the show we will have a new Dreamer and Doer for the month of March, and Lisa Bloom is coming back in the show to talk about Trayvon Martin and her new book. So, boom there.
Can I start with the news?
Yes, this is the news roundup where we share our news stories that made us laugh, cry, irate, and everything else.
Yeah, so if you want to join in with those conversations, the number is 212-650-6903. Again, that number is 212-650-6903. Or you can tweet us at BeHeard_radio. If you're on Facebook, you can get us on LetYourVoiceBeHeard.com. Let Your Voice Be Heard, or Little Be Prosperous, where Alyssa is always holding down great conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about the Ugandan president. They passed those seriously anti-gay laws.
Right.
The president of Uganda's daughter came out as gay.
Stop it, Stanley. Are you serious?
It's
wow.
So great.
Really?
It is so great. She's like, Daddy, remember those laws you passed about gay people? He's like, yeah, aren't they great? She goes, actually, I'm into girls.
Wow.
Yeah. Is that true? It's not from an Onion story?
No, it's not. I wish it was.
I know, right?
It's not.
Wow,
yeah,
that is a really good news story. Look at that.
I think it's a very interesting news story, actually.
It was. But speaking of interesting news stories, so this woman, I think she actually lived near you, Alyssa, on the Upper West Side, but she gave birth on a New York City corner on the sidewalk.
Why are your stories always about weird pregnancy, birth stories? But she gave birth on the sidewalk.
Right. No, she just did. So, she's a 39-year-old woman. This was actually her third pregnancy, so she did it before. And what happened was her water broke, and she went outside from her apartment. Again, she lived in Manhattan in the I think it's either Upper East Side. No, she actually lived on the Upper East Side. So when she went downstairs, the doorman was like, okay, we're going to call you a cab so you can go to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And as they were hailing the cab, someone stole her cab. And then she was like, you know what?
That's the most New York thing I've ever heard in my life.
Stole the cab from a pregnant woman who was in the middle of delivering her baby. So what she did, she just plopped down on the floor. The doorman held her up. A lot of good Samaritans came to offer her coats.
And a bad Samaritan that took her cab, but that's fine. We're over it.
Right. And she delivered that baby right then and there in a few minutes. Well, and then the ambulance came and took her to Lenox Hospital.
Let's not judge that Samaritan because maybe he had something really important. Maybe he was late for a laser tag conference. You don't even know what.
Maybe he was going to the hospital to visit his wife giving birth or something.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's so crazy.
It is crazy.
Anyone like Instagram the video or anything?
What?
We live in a world of tweeting and Facebook and took pictures.
Yeah. No, the Daily News had the Daily News and the New York Post. I think they and reporters showed up on the scene quicker than an ambulance. I think.
Oh my God.
To take pictures of this woman giving. Oh
yeah.
How do you feel?
I think having video in the room during labor is gross enough. Kim
Kardashian did it.
Yeah, but that's Kim Kardashian. Yeah, she's not a real
She's
person.
a caricature of a caricature.
That's really crazy. I get angry when I see people not even giving up their seat on the subway for a pregnant woman. So to take a cab from someone in labor is out of control to me.
I'm down with that cause. Did you guys hear about Spike Lee going ham at Pratt Institute? You know Pratt, Jackie.
I know Pratt.
And he yelled at somebody because they said maybe gentrification could be a good thing.
Right.
And then he was like, they come into our towns and you changing the names and we've been here. And now Bushwick has turned to East Williamsburg and I don't even know what's happening. So he had this big rant about gentrification, how it's destroying the black community. And it's been a big conversation with a lot of people over the last couple of days. What does everyone else feel about that? I know I had something to say, but I want to hear from you guys first.
I mean, I kind of agree with him. There was another critic that actually called Spike Lee racist for some of the things that he said, but he was basically just saying, like, his argument was, you're just saying this because, you know, the influx of white people or middle-class people or upper-middle-class black people who are moving into these neighborhoods. But I do think that it's a reality, especially here in New York City, and I think that it has its pros, it has its cons. And what Spike Lee was saying, that why does it take an influx of a different class of people to get the services and the stores and everything else that we want and we need as taxpayers? And it's not happening until a new group of people move in.
So I guess I'm going to jump in now. I'm a gentrifier. Oh, Lisa was typing. I didn't know you were
ready. No, go for it.
I'm a gentrifier. I'm very happy to say I'm a gentrifier. I'm from East New York, Brooklyn. I graduated from college. I got a job. I'm upwardly mobile. And I moved to Harlem. So I made this place someone in the community. What I always say to people is, you were here before me. Why didn't you buy the property first? It's not always... Spike Lee's painted it as these rich trust fund babies who come to neighborhoods and outplace people. A big reason for gentrification was because a lot of college graduates could not afford to live in the city. So they had to go into these neighborhoods where the rent was low because that's all they could afford. And they live there and they make it their own home. Jackie?
Right. No, I agree with you, but I also think that gentrification is this huge elephant in the room that a lot of like young white people living in Queens and Brooklyn specifically and Manhattan don't want to talk about. It's, you know, it's like a non-issue, and they wrap themselves up in a lot of different causes when there's something that they're contributing right there, and they don't even want to talk about it because it is an awkward conversation. And you're right, a lot of people, you know, it's not just the fact that it's rich kids moving to the city and taking these like, you know, finding apartments that are cheaper elsewhere just to save a little bit of money. It's a lot of college graduates that can't find work, that are, you know, still struggling to get by. But it needs to be a conversation that we're having, and it is so off-putting to so many people that they don't want to accept the fact that they're a huge part of the problem.
Right. And what another point that Spike Lee made really quickly was that regardless, if there are people that are going to move into the neighborhoods, but just show respect for the history and the culture that was there before you. Yeah. And he made that point as a follow-up when he, during an interview on CNN.
Yeah, it would have been better if he didn't curse up a storm and then say that afterwards.
I mean, it's Spike Lee. That's how he gets publicity.
I mean, honestly,
it got my attention.
I think gentrification is a double-edged sword. I believe that I believe that we have an opportunity to help improve and grow our own neighborhoods if we invest in it. Right. And if we also help people invest in it. Calvin Butts, they have a program over here where they give families low interest loans so that they can buy property to keep these neighborhoods, so to speak, in the black community. We need to take advantage of things like that. And also understand that there's nothing wrong with people of different cultures moving into your neighborhood as long as we all respect each other's culture.
Right.
If I move to Connecticut or Atlanta and I start to make it my own, getting involved, that doesn't mean I'm undermining the people who lived there before. I'm embracing it as my home.
Right. And and I think New York has always been so diverse and so changing, and neighborhoods change, you know, almost as often as the weather in New York. Like, I know my mom talks about growing up in the Bronx and how she was a Jewish girl growing up in the Bronx with pictures of her on Santa's lap because her neighborhood was so diverse that everybody sort of adopted each other's culture. And I think that's a great thing, you know, but I think that ignoring this conversation about gentrification only makes the problem worse, and it only creates a deeper divide between our communities. So I think it's something that, you know, a lot of people are talking about and a lot of people are ignoring because it makes them uncomfortable, and they need to get over that fear and start talking about it and start acknowledging the fact that maybe they're contributing to this problem and making a difference. You know, the more they ignore it, the less we're going to be able to do anything about it.
I absolutely agree with that. I said to these guys on the phone on Thursday night that a lot of people, when they talk about gentrification, don't bring up past gentrification. They automatically presume that gentrification involves race. And today it seems, to fall along those lines for the most part. But if you look back historically in gentrification, it wasn't always about race. It was a lot about ethnicity and which different ethnic groups were living in certain areas. The Lower East Side is a great example of that because the Lower East Side used to be a predominantly Jewish area. I mean, you look at places like Katz's Deli. Yeah. And I listened to stories from my family who came here from Hungary, and they lived on East 3rd Street and 1st Avenue. And now if you go to that area, it's been like quote-unquote gentrified. It's just a shift in different groups of people that are living in that area. So it's not, it's definitely in certain areas, race is has a large role to play in gentrification. So anyways, if you have anything to say about this topic, you should give us a call at 212-650-6903. We'd love to hear what you have to say about gentrification.
And sorry to interject. We actually have a caller on the line. We have Deborah from Harlem who wants to let her voice be heard during the news roundup. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, Deborah. Good, thank you.
What were you saying?
The only reason I let her go is because I know she wants to talk about gentrification.
Right, and I was going to change the topic, but I figured as much. Can I bring up a story?
Yeah, you're next. You're next.
All right.
And then they went. Sorry, I know what you were saying to me.
You just kept saying yes. So I was like, okay.
So
No, I had a feeling.
I was saying, I'm like, well, yeah.
No, I knew what you were doing. I knew you had a caller to talk about gentrification, so that's why I was like, I'm going to finish my comment, put the phone number out, and then let Selena jump to the call.
So we were on the same page.
We were.
They wanted to move us out.
Yeah.
Now, there are places in this area that were built because white people didn't want us to live downtown. So they built the buildings up here, and black people made them very nice. And then, when I hear people say, well, things have gotten so much better, since gentrification, no, I don't agree with that.
You want to see Harlem in the
I don't
80s?
agree with that at all. And I live here.
So you
I have had people walk around Schaumburg who have given history lessons that don't know what the hell they're talking about.
You should respond.
And look at me as if to say, what did you stop and look at me for while I'm talking? Because I want to listen. And I have a right to stand on the street corner and listen. Maybe I didn't pay for that.
Thank you so much for that comment, Deborah.
We had a two-parter about Harlem, the history of Harlem. They put us in the basement. They didn't put us upstairs where other people have their history lessons. So things have really
That's
changed.
part of the gentrification
Your
thing.
whole gentrification thing,
black folks.
you
I know,
stick
but
around
it's
long enough and
expensive,
you'll
and
find
that's-
out, and you'll find
That's a
out
good
that
thing
you're
these
not going to
properties
be
going
part
up,
of
isn't
this whole.
We'll talk about it after the show.
Thank you so much for that, Deborah. So, Deborah, I want to actually directly address one or two things you said before we went on to the next topic. I know we can't stay on this long because we have other news stories, but you mentioned that I want to agree with you. I want to agree and disagree. You're absolutely right. There were definitely mechanisms and people who made sure to structure parts of the city so that you can keep African Americans out. If you go back to even the Harlem Renaissance, home to Harlem, it was the Mecca of black people, so to speak. And we did, in many ways, build up this area and make it as beautiful as it is, and we have a long line of history over here. But to say that gentrification, or not gentrification, just to say that gentrification has not helped to improve the neighborhood, I have to disagree. I don't like the idea of people being pushed out of their neighborhoods, but let's not forget about Harlem in the 80s and the 90s. Let's not forget about 124th Street and 3rd Avenue right now. There are definitely some things going wrong, and that were going wrong before that were not being addressed. I think what we should be more upset about is the fact that it took and forgive me for being so incendiary, for Noah and Becky to come out here, for them to be addressed. And for that, we need to contact elected officials, the NYPD, and put some pressure on Bill de Blasio. But we can't lie to ourselves and say that everything was hunky-dory, and then Noah's and Becky's and Willow's came up here and just stole everything from us. That's not the case. You couldn't walk down 125th Street after 5 p.m.
Right. But what happened to these people that were displaced?
Yeah, where are they moving to? Where are they being pushed to?
That's why that Mayor Bloomberg's plan New York 2020, where they want to push lower income people further away from the city and put people with disposable income closer to the city and make it more of a foot traffic place because
that's already happening now.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on now.
That's already happened, so I don't know. You know what I mean?
It's still happening now. Harlem is getting a big push on that now as well because it's still very much so African American Latino area, and a lot of these families are moving out to the South and everything else like that. But
yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing issue, and we'll definitely bring that up here. I think Alyssa had another quick news story, and then we're going to go to break.
Yeah. I did. So I don't know if you heard about what's going on with the Jason Collins thing, but the NBA is going to donate all of the proceeds from the jersey that Jason Collins wore during the games to a gay rights group. So if you don't know, Jason Collins, he was signed by the Nets to a 10-day contract to come play for them. He wore number 98. Number 98 is a reference to Matthew Shepard, who was the gay college student who was murdered in 1998. Yeah. And the NBA is going to donate all the proceeds to the Matthew Shepard Foundation and the It's GLSEN, Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. Collins, if you don't know, became the first NBA player who was openly gay when he signed with the Brooklyn Nets. As I said, his jersey number is 98 to represent 1998, and the league said that the donations will be no less than $100,000, and they will also auction off Collins' autographed game-worn jerseys to benefit the same organizations. Collins responded, said that he was thrilled to help these organizations and that he wanted to work he was talking about the organizations. He said he's thrilled to help the organizations that work tirelessly to ensure LGBT youth get the resources and assistance they need to have successful in life. And he also got to meet Matthew Shepard's parents when the Nets played Denver last week.
That's right. That's
you
amazing.
Gotta stop reading that stuff. It's so just I like it when you talk to me.
Well, I listen. I want to get it right when I I want to make sure I have the right information from
You're
you.
the encyclopedia. You know everything. Stop lying to us.
No, I don't know everything. I know where to. I mean, the stuff I do know a lot of things, but the stuff I don't know, it's about knowing where to find the information,
which is important. But thank you so much for that, Alyssa. Thank you so much, guys. Do we have time for the news story? We're going to break. One more? Okay, right. So I just want to bring up really quickly, this week, President Obama launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative at the White House, which, again, is urging stronger efforts to create more opportunities for young minority men of color. That means black men and black and Latino men, well, young men at that. And what it does is it's going to, basically put all of this money, effort, and energy towards helping them get job opportunities, education, etc. And I think that a lot of the commentary around the issue was better late than never. I mean, the black community has said a lot about Barack Obama and if he was addressing the African American needs. And of course, we know that the African American community voted for him in both elections in large numbers. So I think that this speaks directly. I mean, he's done a number of initiatives and policies that helped African Americans, but this is just something that's really direct. So kudos and yay. Okay, so we're going to a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're coming back with Lisa Bloom right here on Let Your Voice Be Heard. On the camera, sorry.
What you call it? Never call back to curse me out.
What she said? Did she use her? Did she use profanity?
Yeah. She was like, listen, you need to know your history because you don't know a motherfucking thing. And a lot of people are offended by the shit you say because you're always running all talking at the mouth and it's all funny when you joking and shit. When you disrespect where I grew up at, you don't know anything. So I'm like, oh, Miss Deborah. And she's like, no, shut the fuck up. And
how do you take that, Silly? And where's Lisa Bloom?
Because it's a black establishment.
You deal with that.
It's a black establishment. You know I don't give a fuck about the black establishment.
I'm about to call Lisa Bloom's cell phone. I'm sorry.
Because, I mean, listen, gentrification is a bad thing when it displaces people. But I'm not going to ignore the fact that a lot of these people who are complaining now, who are in a position to uplift the community by investing, did not. And a lot of people who are mad about these new faces in the community are not necessarily mad because they're displacing them. They're mad because they don't like white people in their neighborhood. There's a lot of different issues. Sorry.
I just had a conversation about
gentrification is a multi-layered
And we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM. We just had a great conversation, great news roundup, great discussion about the anti-gay laws going on in America. And now we are going to talk about Trayvon Martin, the George Zimmerman trial, and everything that went wrong. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, February 26th, which just recently passed last week, marked the 2-year anniversary when Trayvon Martin was shot. Again, he was a 17-year-old, unarmed, black teenager walking through a gated community in Florida with iced tea and Skittles, and he was shot down by George Zimmerman, basically because George Zimmerman could not follow directions. Again, he called the cops, saying that, this is a person, I don't want to repeat the profanity that he used, but he referenced him as an effing punk and these a-holes, and basically just insinuating that I'm going to go get him. The police told him, we don't need you to do that. Nonetheless, he decided to pursue Trayvon Martin. A confrontation ensued, and as a result, Trayvon Martin was shot dead. And we will be actually speaking, looking at this case and speaking with Lisa Bloom. We have her on the line. Let me just give you a little bit more background information about what happened and Lisa Bloom's book, Suspicion Nation. Okay, so as I mentioned, racial equality has been a long-fought evil that has plagued America for centuries. And although we elected the first African-American president in 2008, it still persists to be a prevalent issue that has stifled the progression of African-Americans in employment, housing, education, and the media. Now, the national discourse around racial inequality and racial profiling peaked around this issue when Trayvon Martin was first shot in 2012, and then again during the George Zimmerman trial. And that happened over the summer 2013. So, and again, as we know, even though there was a lot of protest, there was a lot of outrage, George Zimmerman was acquitted. He was acquitted by an all-female panel, all-female jury. 5 of the women were white, 1 was Hispanic, and they found him not guilty on all charges, and he's currently living almost like a celebrity life. He signed up for a celebrity boxing match. He's been taking pictures and with other people at a gun manufacturer, in a gun manufacturing factory, like he's a celebrity, and it's almost like ridiculous. And he's been making news so much with all of these different run-ins with the law. One was with his estranged wife, who he allegedly pointed a gun. And of course we know that she pressed charges, but then she recanted and she dropped the charges. And then he had a new girlfriend who said the same thing, like he pointed his gun at me, he threatened me verbally, and she pressed charges and then she dropped the charges again. So I mean, it's just been like a whole whirlwind around George Zimmerman, and it's just Trayvon Martin, his family, and the people who have been feeling this outrage in America for centuries, for decades, just don't feel like the justice was served. Just don't feel like justice, it was like a miscarriage of justice. And that's why we actually have on the line with us again Lisa Bloom. Let me just give you a formal introduction to her. She is a legal analyst at avo.com. Also she's a prominent civil rights attorney, a former TV host, and New York Times best-selling author. She is also a legal analyst for The Today Show and MSNBC. She's also contributed to CNN, and CBS. And lastly, she is an official friend of Let Your Voice Be Heard, now that this is her 3rd time. And again, she will be speaking about her new book, Suspicion Nation, which takes a deeper look at what the prosecution did wrong in the George Zimmerman case and trial. Good afternoon, Lisa. Thank you so much. We always love it when you're here. I gave like a pretty good synopsis about what went wrong and what's been going on for the last 2 years, ever since Trayvon Martin was shot dead. We also know we had the cases of Jordan Davis, Renisha McBride, which followed afterward. Seems like the gun laws strengthened after these tragic shootings. And I guess the way I want to open it up is, in your book, Suspicion Nation, you actually explain how, and I quote, "This winnable case was lost." Can you explain how so?
So I watched this case day to day for MSNBC and covered it and talked about everything what I was seeing in the courtroom. But as I did, I became very disturbed, because having watched high-profile cases in America for about the last 18 years, I saw a case that was being handled very differently. And I was very concerned about it, and I knew that it was going to end in an acquittal because the prosecution was not doing its job, and in closing argument asked questions rather than making definitive statements linking the evidence and the law. They were essentially arguing reasonable doubt, just like the defense. So when the case was over, I was not done. I was not able to put it behind me. I don't know how you felt, but I felt this was a terrible injustice. I felt in my gut that something was wrong. And I had to find out not only what did happen, but what didn't happen. And that's the investigation I did in the months after the trial, talking to new witnesses, talking to a juror, the only non-white juror, a woman named Maddie, and I begin the book with her story. And the results are my book, Suspicion Nation, which I'm so grateful to say today is now a bestseller.
Wow,
everybody's
already?
reading this book and tweeting me about it. And I had to reveal what went wrong behind the scenes in this case. All the mistakes that the prosecutors made, many of which are rookie mistakes, which you do not see happening in other cases. And the second half of the book, as you say, are the bigger issues about why there continues to be so much racism in our criminal justice system, and the issues of guns and stand your ground.
Right. And guys, let me just throw the number out there. If you are listening and you would like to ask Lisa Bloom a question about the George Zimmerman case, what went wrong, or just about her book, Suspicion Nation, the number is 212-650-6903. And Lisa, what the book did, and I actually did have a chance to start reading it, is it actually pinpoints a number of missteps that the prosecution took during the trial. And I mean, it's just like mind-blowing, because you highlight it, you're right on point, and you emphasize that they should have did this, they should have did that. If you can just give us just, give us what they did wrong in your opinion.
Oh, like I said, many of us had this feeling in our gut that something was wrong, but I'm a lawyer. I don't want to just base my opinion on my gut. I wanted facts and I wanted evidence. The biggest mistake probably the prosecution made, among many, is that they failed to notice that George Zimmerman indicated on a videotape that his gun was holstered behind him in an inside waistband holster. And he says he was lying on his back and Trayvon was on top of him. And Trayvon saw the gun, reached for the gun, and that's why Zimmerman had to pull it and shoot him.
That's a good notes, right?
Well, in that position, unless Trayvon Martin
I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying I took good because she's talking about exactly what I highlighted in the notes. So I'm kind of picking myself up.
And if you
inside of his pants. And when you add to that, it was a very dark night. It was raining, and there was grassy ground cover. His story simply does not add up. The prosecution missed this in the trial, and probably the other biggest thing they missed was talking about race. The defense in this case made it about race. Let's be just clear and direct about that. They compared Trayvon Martin to two African-American burglars who had been in the neighborhood 6 months earlier, and the prosecution failed to jump to their feet, as any decent lawyer would have, and said, what does that have to do with Trayvon Martin? He has no connection to those burglars. How dare you bring that into this case? You know, to attribute the wrongs of two African-Americans to all African-Americans is the very definition of racism. There was not an advocate for Trayvon Martin in the courtroom. This should have been the prosecution, and they failed to do their job.
Exactly, Lisa. And so the question that leads me to is, why did all of these missteps take place? Was the prosecution just not into it? Did they not believe the side of Trayvon Martin themselves? Were their hearts not in it? Like, what do you say about why this happened? Right.
I let the reader of my book, Suspicion Nation, come to his or her own conclusion. There's been a real debate on my Twitter page about this, at Lisa Bloom. I'm going to let you come to your own conclusion about that. I will tell you mine, which is I don't think they believed in the case.
Yeah,
I don't think their heart was in it. I think they were subject to the same racial biases that many people in America are still subject to, that we don't like to talk about, but that are clearly there. I don't think they believed that Trayvon Martin was truly the victim and not the aggressor. And that showed through in the way that they tried the case. They didn't look for evidence that would have been there. They didn't prepare their witnesses. I have a whole chapter about Rachel Gentile. People will remember she was the young woman that was a friend of Trayvon's that he was talking to on the phone. Her testimony did not come across well. Why? Because she was not prepared by the prosecutor in the way that they prepared witnesses in any other case. Many times in trials, we have somebody who's young, someone who's old, someone who's nervous, people with criminal convictions, people who are gang members, people with mental disorders. I mean, she was none of those things. She was just a young woman who was nervous, and I tell the story about how poorly prepared she was and the story that she would have told if she had been prepared properly, like witnesses should be and are in most murder cases in America.
Right, exactly. And Stanley, I know that, did you want to, because Rachel Gentile, did you want to mention something about that?
Yeah, so I was reading the book, and I remember when the chapter with Rachel Gentile, you mentioned that at like 4 months into, like right before the case is happening, some close members from Gentile's church contacted their friend who was a lawyer because the prosecution had not reached out to Rachel at all. And he was only able to meet with her the day before the case, and he helped her as best as he could. He met with the prosecution on the elevator, gave them his card and said, I'm her lawyer, contact me. They never did. The prosecution only talked to Rachel after putting her in a room for 2 days, giving her videos with no instructions, and then giving her pretty much a 20-minute crash course right before she went to the stand.
It really is.
Supposed to go down, especially in the highest profile case in America. You take her in there on the weekend when there's nobody in the courtroom, you put her up on the witness stand, you get her used to talking into microphones, which is uncomfortable for many people, which she had never done before. You stand in the back of the courtroom, you go through the questions, and then you say, okay, listen, Rachel, I was not able to hear you. You didn't speak clearly. Please slow down, speak into the microphone. Let's do it again. You know, the other problem with Rachel is that she had an underbite, which is a medical condition. It has nothing to do with credibility. She needed surgery. She hadn't had it yet. So she had a bit of a speech impediment. The prosecution should have pointed that out to the jury because the fact that they didn't means that the jurors thought she was mumbling because she wasn't confident or because she wasn't intelligent. And so, I tell the story of behind the scenes how the jurors completely discounted her testimony, which was the most important testimony in the case because she was on the phone with Trayvon Martin at the moment that he met up with George Zimmerman. But none of that testimony came through clearly to the jury.
Right, and one of the another key points that you pointed out is that the prosecution did not bring up is that Rachel Gentile and Trayvon Martin were actually having a very lighthearted conversation before he had this conversation with George Zimmerman, and the reason why that's important because the defense tried to paint it as like Trayvon Martin was out to do something bad or he was just this aggressor, and that just frankly wasn't true. Guys, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with Lisa Bloom about her new book, Suspicion Nation. We're taking an inside look about the injustice of Trayvon Martin's death and then the acquittal of George Zimmerman, his murderer.
Yeah, so my question is, it seems to me, hearing all these details and reading more into it, that the prosecution definitely did not try as hard as they should have and they didn't properly do their jobs. But do you think that the law itself meant that this trial was, doomed before it even started? I mean, the
formed. And, I tell the story in the book of Maddie the juror, who is so distraught to this day about the verdict that she felt that she had to participate in our republic. We didn't have this law. We were just fine without it. And the prior law was, if you're in a violent situation and you can retreat safely, you're required to do that. And doesn't that just comport with our common sense? If you can get out of a situation without hurting anyone, that's better. Well, Stand Your Ground says that's no longer required, that you can plant your feet, you can pull a gun if you feel that your life is threatened, and shoot. The problem is that after a shooting, we usually only have the shooter's word for what happened. The victim is silenced, and we have to try to reconstruct. Hard to get convictions. Somebody, your defense, your best defense is self-defense. George Zimmerman certainly knew that because he had taken a criminal justice class and he got an A in the class. The professor testified at trial. So he knew what he had to say when the police arrived and he had a smoking gun in hand and Trayvon Martin lay there dead. That was his argument. And, he almost got away with it. He did get away with it at the trial by getting acquitted, but I think I wanted to write this book to show everyone who has that gut feeling that something was wrong, that you're right. Something was very wrong. They're accountable to us. They're public servants. They're paid with tax dollars, and they should be accountable for the terrible job they did and for their failure to give Trayvon Martin a fair trial.
Lisa, I want to talk about one huge oversight that you mentioned
in the book.
In the book, actually, I'm sorry about the list of it. You mentioned that the prosecution didn't properly explain to the jury the self-defense because they did not use Stand Your Ground in the trial. Actually, that's one thing that you mentioned. They did not use Stand Your Ground.
So, Stand Your Ground was not part of the trial until it was. And what I mean by that was that George Zimmerman could have asked for a pre-trial hearing on Stand Your Ground.
I don't know. She needs to love. I don't know.
And if he had won that, there would have been no trial. He didn't do that. And that's because it really wasn't a Stand Your Ground case because he said he was lying on his back, pinned down. He had no opportunity.
That's like the second time I guess she wanted to say something and I talked about it. Her hand was raised. She was like texting.
Stand Your Ground is part of the standard Florida jury instructions. So the jurors were told by the judge, it's right there in the jury instructions, that George Zimmerman had a right to stand his ground. And one of the jurors in an interview right after the decision said, George Zimmerman had the right to stand his ground. So it clearly came into their thinking and their deliberations. And the bigger issue is in the state of Florida and the other 25 Stand Your Ground states, this is just part of the cultural DNA now. People know that you have the right to stand, pull out a gun, and shoot if you feel threatened. Now, I want to say there are still 3 important requirements. You have to be in reasonable, that's number 1, fear of imminent, that's number 2, great bodily injury or death, number 3. So you can't just shoot anytime you feel scared. The prosecution in the Zimmerman case failed to point out those 3 important elements to the jury, and I think if they had done that, it could have very well been a different verdict.
You're right, Lisa Bloom. We have Lisa Bloom on the line, but we actually have to take a quick break. We're speaking about her book, Suspicion Nation. We'll be back with more about what went wrong in the George Zimmerman trial right here on Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Peekaboo. Peekaboo, smile.
What is wrong with you?
Nothing.
The way you stormed out.
Oh, I went to get a drink because I was really parched.
Alyssa, that was so disruptive. Like, this is live radio. Can you not go like that and walk out like that?
I thought the mics were off. I needed a drink.
I was talking.
Yeah, like, how did you think the mics were off?
No, I'm sorry. I thought that you had my mic off and I really needed a drink, but like you were not communicating well, and it's really annoying.
Alyssa, do you remember when I was like, Alyssa, do you want to go next? I thought you were ignoring me on purpose.
No, I said, yeah, I'm ready.
The whole time.
Yeah,
well, why didn't you tell me
about
that?
this.
Well, Stanley's not leading the segment. I'm the one that give the word.
You said Jackie was going to go, and then I was going to speak, so I thought it was already decided. So I was waiting for her to finish. I'm about to speak, and then the next thing I know, Stanley's speaking. So
I think it was a miscommunication.
It was
on everybody's part. I know that they're looking for you for visual cues, and if that was said before, then that was
I thought we already had it decided.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
And we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. We are speaking with the very lovely, the very smart, and the very high-profile civil rights attorney, Lisa Bloom. You can also find her on the Today Show and MSNBC, where she is a legal analyst, and also a commentator. And she has a new book out, Suspicion Nation, which takes an inside look of the George Zimmerman trial and the injustice of Trayvon Martin's death and then the acquittal of his killer. And it's just happening over and over again. Similar circumstances with Jordan Davis. You can also say, you can make an argument about Renisha McBride, because her shooter also argues that Stand Your Ground gave him the right to shoot before not even knowing that this person was not a threat. This 19-year-old African-American woman